Well, hello again, friends. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Today is January 2nd, 2026, the second day of my oh, goal to film daily for the course of the year. I think could be challenging sometimes, but I, I think really what I'd like to do is to build some consistency in some of my habits. So that's what I'm working on here. I noticed in yesterday's video, which I posted, even though I kind of had second thoughts about it, I didn't look great, man. I was so tired after New Year's Eve. And that's something that I think all of us deal with at some point is we want to do the things that we've always done, but our bodies change over time. I'm 62 years old. I'll be 63 in June. And it's catching up with me. But that doesn't mean I should give up on doing the things I enjoy. As I said yesterday, I'm going to try to do at least one thing a day that I really feel like doing, whatever it happens to be that day. Today, I needed to go out to pick up a few things from the grocery store, which was incredibly crowded. I'm thinking that people may still be off. They may not be returning to work until Monday. And as a retiree, I feel grateful that I don't have to go back into the office the day after holiday. I know I struggled many years with working the day after Christmas or the day after New Year's because I didn't feel I should take those days off when other people were traveling or something. So I'm thankful now that I don't have to worry about that anymore. My schedule is pretty much my own. I'm still working today, but I didn't have to get up and go to the office, which is really nice in the winter. I'm so happy not to have to go out and scrape the car in the mornings. Winters in Nevada can get very cold. January and February can be some of our coldest months, and we may get some snow. There's none on the ground right now. Today's a little bit like spring, and it was rather loud when I stepped outside to go to the grocery store. The birds were singing in the trees and very loudly. It was a lot of birds. So it was always interesting to remember that there are still animals out living in the cold. We do see a lot of deer in town at this time of year. I think in the summer months they tend to go up into the hills, but they come down here into Carson City in the winter, and it's always fun to see them. Last week I was outside. I don't remember why I went outside, but there were two deer standing in the middle of the road. We're not on a heavily traveled street, though we are close to the sheriff's office, so sometimes emergency vehicles can come through here pretty quickly, but it was a quiet day, and the deer were just standing there looking around because honestly, it's their world and we're just sharing it. It's so funny. Urban deer are awesome. I think it was a couple years ago now, JT and I looked out our kitchen window and saw that a deer had just given birth in our yard. So we had a fawn in our yard for weeks. Couldn't do any yard work or anything, and it was fun watching the little one grow. But we were also stressed because being nature, things can happen, and we were worried that something might happen to this fawn that we were growing quite attached to. But the mama deer tucked the little doe, or excuse me, the little fawn away in the bushes during the day when she went out to forage, and then she'd come back in the evening and the two of them would cuddle. So that was very sweet. Nature is awesome. I love getting outside, and I really need to do it more often. As a retiree working from home, sometimes I get busy and I forget that there's a world outside the front door. So something to remember if you are in a similar position, whether you're retired or you just regularly work from home. Step outside every once in a while. Listen to the birds. Look to see where whatever your local urban wildlife might be. Or if you live in a rural area, you probably have a lot more opportunities to see animals like foxes or coyotes or mountain cats or bears. Another funny story, we lived in a house in the southern part of town for a few years, and we joked because when we lived on the west side of Carson City, there were quail everywhere. Our yard was always completely full of quail, and we had very large windows that the quail tended to fly into. And when we moved to the southern part of the town, we knew there weren't going to be a lot of quail over there because it was a lot more exposed. But I joked about bears, and it was about a block away from an elementary school. So, you know, basically a subdivision and a big road, 4-lane, and an elementary school. So it was very developed. But we were pretty close to Prison Hill. So if anybody is familiar with Carson City, you have a vague idea of where Prison Hill is, to the southeast of 5th Street, which is close to the historic Nevada State Prison. So we were down in that area. And believe it or not, one day there was a commotion up the street from us, about a block and a half. I looked out. We had a 2-story house that we were renting, and the master bedroom faced the street. So I looked out the bedroom windows up the street to see what was going on. And there was a bear in the tree, pretty much almost directly across the street from the elementary school. So that was interesting. And it was a little nerve-wracking. They managed to get the bear safely and relocate them. I think they take them out into the hills a distance away so that hopefully they don't return, because it's difficult. We also lived close to Lake Tahoe, and a lot of people around the lake have problems with bears, and there is a local bear league that tries to protect the bears because sometimes people aren't too smart about interacting with wildlife. And it's funny, this is not the video I meant to record today. Somehow I got off on a tangent about wildlife, but it was nice to get out of the house and remember that there's a world outside my front door. So I guess that was my fun thing for the day. I also went out and I had to clean the inside of my windshield because it got that, I don't know what it is, maybe off-gassing from the upholstery or something. My car is probably 7 or 8 years old now, so it's not brand new upholstery, but not a lot of people ride in my car. It still looks very new, and I think the off-gassing, that film builds up on the interior of my windshield, so I had to go take care of that. So I spent a little bit of time outside of the house this morning, which was nice. This afternoon, my plan is to do some more writing. I'm still working to complete my work in progress. Like I said yesterday, I am hoping to send this off to the editors by the beginning of February. So what will happen is once I have a clean draft, I will send it to JT. He'll read over it and give me some insight, because in this one in particular, I really want to know what he thinks. One of my characters has cochlear implants, and JT also has cochlear implants. So I am very familiar with them as a person who lives with someone that has cochlear implants, but I want to make sure that I get things from the perspective of the person who actually has the implants. And I'm interested to see how well I've picked up on how he feels about having these implants. And actually the implants will turn out to be a pivotal part of this story. I won't give much more of that away, but it is the second book in my Restless Spirit series. The first book, Passion Restored, is already out in the world, so if you're interested, you can go and check that out. But once I get book 2 to the editors, I've already written book 3. Book 3 was initially intended to be the first book, or maybe the only book. It might have been a standalone, but my ideas developed and expanded, so I ended up with the idea for a 6-book series. I already have the 6 books planned out. So this year, I should be releasing books 2 and 3. Maybe if I am inspired, I might get the 4th book out toward the end of the year as well. But I'm also throwing another book in there, which I've mentioned in the past. It's called Battleborn Bride. That one is a historical romance, and I will probably be spending a little bit of time where I formerly worked at the Nevada State Library and Archives doing some more research, because the book takes place in 1863, 1864, during Nevada statehood, when the Silver State became an actual state. And a lot of the ideas for that book came to me while I was working at the state archives. I'll give you one more quick story before I end this video for the day, but the Nevada Constitutional Convention is a very interesting time period, and I don't think a lot of people know about it. It was, people had moved to Nevada after the 49ers went to California for the big gold rush after the discovery of gold at Sutter's Fort. And when the people, when that played out, pretty much, the people started coming back into Nevada. And about that time, there was a discovery, I think it was the Grosh brothers. Don't quote me on that. I need to revisit the information, but there was a discovery of silver up in the Comstock area. They, let's see, I believe the first discovery was downhill a little bit toward Dayton, Nevada. So that would be east of Carson City. The bulk of the Comstock lode was up in Virginia City and Gold Hill, and there are a lot of mines under that area. So the mines play a big part into the current series I'm working on, the Restless Spirit series. But the mines also played a part in Nevada statehood, partially. A lot of people think that the Comstock silver was what President Lincoln wanted, but he also wanted votes. And Nevada didn't have a lot of population, despite the Comstock lode. We weren't really populated enough to be a state yet, because most of the population center was Reno, Carson City, Genoa, Dayton, all condensed into this area in the western portion of the state, just downhill from Lake Tahoe. Southern Nevada hadn't really been colonized much yet. There were people down there, but Las Vegas wasn't really a thing until the beginning of the 20th century. So most of the people who had come to Nevada territory by that point were in this little area. And the Civil War was still going on in the East. You had people on both sides out in this part of the world, but they weren't quite as, I don't know, they weren't fighting each other quite as strongly out here, because they were more interested in making their fortune. And in that environment, in 1863, Nevada tried to create a constitution and become a state. That first constitution failed. That first constitutional convention failed. The constitution for the state of Nevada was actually based on California, because so many people had come back over the hill from the Golden State to the Silver State, and there were some things in there that they did not agree with. So there was a second constitutional convention in 1864. I think I've mentioned previously that Mark Twain was in the area at the time. He'd come here as Sam Clemens to work with his brother Orion, or Orion, depending on how you pronounce it. I call him Orion Clemens, who was the territorial secretary at the time. So Sam Clemens came out with Orion, and they, while Orion was doing his thing as a territorial secretary, Sam he worked for the Territorial Enterprise. He would attend the Constitutional Convention meetings and the territorial legislature meetings and kind of report on those as well. And there was a lot of divisiveness, but it wasn't quite as intense as what was going on back east with the Civil War. So in late 1864, coming up on the presidential election, Lincoln really wanted votes. He was afraid that he would not win re-election. And I think a lot of, the way the tide would turn with the Civil War was related to whether or not Lincoln was still in office. That's a whole thing. I haven't really done a deep dive into that part of the history. But basically, one of the main reasons that Lincoln wanted Nevada to become a state was for the votes. So, Nevada approved a constitution and then sent it to Washington, D.C., hoping to get it approved in time for the presidential election so that there would be the Nevada votes would count toward that. And so one went overland and one went by sea. Neither of those made it to Washington, D.C. in time. So I can't remember who we were dealing with back in Washington at that point, but they said, you need to get this to us as soon as possible in order for this to be approved in time for everything to play out the way we hope it will. And they ended up sending the entire Nevada State Constitution to Washington, D.C. by telegram. At the time, it was the longest and most expensive telegram ever sent. It disrupted telegraph traffic for the Civil War back east because it had to be relayed from Carson City to another point. At one point, it went through Philadelphia, and eventually it was picked up in Washington, D.C., and that version of the Constitution was approved in D.C. and sent back. The approval was sent back to Nevada on October 31st, 1864. So that is why Nevada celebrates statehood on Halloween, because we basically were approved for statehood. We received the information that we were approved for statehood. Governor Nye, Territorial Governor Nye, I believe was out of the area, so I don't remember specifically who. I'm guessing maybe Orion Clemens, as the secretary, may have been the person that was dealing with the Carson City end of that approval process to make sure everything was done properly here. I need to go back and check my figures and facts again, but I think, if my memory serves me correctly, that's what was going on. So I meant this to be a short story, but while I worked at the Nevada State Archives, one of my great honors was to actually be able to work with the original Nevada State Constitution. We had the draft version, which the State Archive still has, the draft version and the approved version with all the signatures. There is a display case in the upstairs portion of the Nevada State Library with a facsimile, a duplicate of that original Constitution. Initially, the exhibit cases were in another part of the building that was later given over to another state agency. So the Nevada State Library and Archives building no longer completely belongs to the Nevada State Library and Archives, but that display case is now in the library with that duplicate of the Nevada State Constitution, which I personally was able to digitize and print, and we put the original back into storage. There is a vault where all the important records are kept at the Nevada State Archives, and the state constitution is stored in that vault, but the facsimile version is on display, and it can be visited anytime. Just if you're in Carson City, go into the Nevada State Library and go upstairs. It's the old federal publications section of the library, and you are able to go up there and look at it. We tried to get it as close to the original as possible. The paper looks old and faded and everything, and the display case itself was built specifically for the Constitution, the way it's laid out. So all the pages are on display, and you can see both the first page and the signature page, as well as everything in between. The Constitution is handwritten in cursive, So it's not easy for some people to read because some people do not know cursive at this point, and it's that was one of my pride and joys while working at the Nevada State Archives, was being able to deal with the Nevada State Constitution. That was something we would bring out during tours. Um, and I can talk more about my time in the archives. I could talk about that forever. But as I said, not quite the quick story I meant it to be, but that's a little background on the Nevada constitutional period as we went from a territory to a state, and the how that is going to play into my book, Battleborn Bride, is that someone comes to Carson City from another place. There are references to things happening in the Civil War. There are references to Mark Twain. There will be a lot of information about what was going on here in Carson City during the constitutional conventions as the approval process was happening, because it had to be approved first at the territorial level before it went to the federal level. So all of that is going to play into my book, and the ideas came to me while I was working with the Constitution when I worked at the Nevada State Archives. So a little bit of a convoluted story, but it all makes sense in the end, I hope. Anyway, this video turned out a bit longer than I expected. Like I said, started rambling about nature, which I did not intend, but I hope that I provided you some interesting information. I will say that my husband and I are hoping to, with our company, Two More Books LLC, one of our hopes is to educate, entertain, and encourage. And I'm making these videos hopefully on a daily basis this year as a means of providing some information, providing some encouragement, maybe a little entertainment along the way. Also, I'm hoping that this will serve as a little bit of a video diary, because as we get older, we have so many things in our mind that we kind of forget the small things that happen on a day-to-day basis. So the fact that I went out to do grocery shopping today, heard the birds singing, and then was enjoying the outdoors a little bit will be nice to remember later in the year, because I can look back and go, well, what did I do on January 2nd? If I didn't document it, I wouldn't remember. Anyway, thank you for hanging out with me through my ramble. I don't know if any of these will ever be a little bit more coherent, but like I said, maybe, hopefully, it will provide a little education, encouragement, and entertainment. Anyway, I am Cassidy Carson, and this is the Life of a Writer. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.